allow for the recording so that we can share this on our various platforms for those who may not necessarily be able to join. So we are doing the welcoming now. We'll look at it through what is a policy, right through to having group discussions on things you must consider with regards to writing a policy brief, as well as looking at what do you call it, the dissemination of the policy itself, the policy brief itself. So these will be the moderators for the day. My name is Gina Teddy, Dr. Gina Teddy. I'm sitting in Accra, and I'm actually the head of department for the public management and international relation. I'm also the co-chair for the Center Health Systems Global Teaching and Learning Thematic Working Group, as well as the lead for the Systac Africa team. So I'm happy to have you here. I think I'll introduce my colleagues, and then when it's their turn to talk, they would introduce themselves. I have with me a colleague, Dr. Dinkley Mulusiwa, who is right under me. And she is actually a senior lecturer at the University of Botswana. We have another colleague, Dr. John Boati, who is in charge of the research unit at the Parliament of Ghana. And then we have one of our other colleagues, Dr. Kadidio Kadi, and she is at the IRSS in Burkina Faso, sitting in Ouagadougou right now. So these are the key panelists who will be leading our discussion today. And it's not just a discussion, but it is actually guiding you through how to write a policy brief. So telling you about Systac a little bit quickly. Systac is a global institution, basically. Systac allow us to do several things. And as you can see, this is the map of the world. You can see we have representatives all over the world in almost all the continents across board. So these are the global Systac team doing the same thing that we are doing now in their own continent. So the key thing about Systac is that we provide a platform for systems thinking application, especially for practitioners, researchers, students, and advocates, and mostly is targeting decision makers as well. And the whole idea is that most of the time we make short-term decisions. And also, even if we take the time to do a lot of work by collecting data, we don't disseminate this information or evidence that will help decision makers to make decisions. So this community came together to promote systems thinking in everything that we do in terms of decision making, in terms of practice, in terms of allocating of resources. It should be based on physical needs and rather than any other thing. It is a community that engages with the tools and methods. There are so many methods out there, and we kind of provide some capacity for critical masses that need it and allow people who are very experienced to share their experiences. And the four panelists that we have today are panelists who are very good in terms of policy because they work with it, they've been producing them, and they are very familiar with the process. We also amplify applied systems thinking, particularly for practitioners and advocates, so that they can use it to advocate effectively. And one of the advocacy means is basically using policy briefs. For Systac Africa, basically, it's led by myself and Dinkley, but we have sub-regional support. So in West Africa, I'm leading it. In Southern Africa, Dr. Mulusiwa is leading it. In Africa, East Africa, one of our other colleagues is leading it, as in Central and Northern Africa. So we are trying now to engage more. Our main activities will be to support emerging leaders, build their capacities, their competences, and their confidence, whether they are doing it as people who are working as health workers or any other person within the broader health systems framework. or whether they are also students who are doing research and require any of these tools to be able to undertake, or whether they are researchers. Even if they are working within the community, we also want to support them so they can build their capacities. So that is the essence of having the Systac Africa do some of these training programs. Then we also want to create awareness about systems thinking processes and also approaches and tools. So tomorrow's training, for instance, is on using process mapping to improve performance for managers. So that one is for managers. I'm sure some of you would be joining that as well. So just to let you know the extent of the things that we do. And then most importantly for this network is to build a community of practice where we can support each other. So assuming you are a research student, or you are a researcher, or even you are an implementer, decision maker, and you are struggling with something that you have to implement or work with, and you think, let me ask this community of practice, has anybody done this? Or there is this issue that I need to resolve, what would be the best way? So we want to create that atmosphere, that community of practice where we can learn as we engage and support each other. Because what we notice is that the challenges that we are facing where I sit at the moment in Accra is similar to what is happening in Botswana, where my colleague is sitting, or in Burkina, where my other colleague is also sitting. So these things, these issues are very common across board. And for that matter, we need to promote them commonly so that we'll be able to engage with each other in supporting to resolve our problems. The biggest issue is that most of the time, especially for students and researchers, we do this research, but when it comes to dissemination, it becomes a problem. So one of the things that we are very passionate about is supporting to through such workshops as we are doing now. We may have mini conferences which will invite some of you to engage, or all of you, those who are interested. We'll be having another one later on in how to write blogs, and so on, maybe case study writing, so that you can disseminate your work. If you disseminate it, then people will know what is happening. Otherwise, we do fantastic work, but we can't disseminate it. So these are the purposes for which Systac is engaging. I would hand over, you can please, I'll encourage all of you to put your comments in the chat. We'll address them as soon as we have the time to do that. So if you have any comments, anything at all, kindly put them in the chat box and then we'll do that. I'll hand you over to my colleague Selena, who would basically walk us through the work of Recover. So Selena, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teddy. So colleagues, Dr. Teddy, could you scroll down the presentation? Okay, thank you very much. So for want of time, we are actually going to drop you the link to the website of 1L and Recover to enable you get, a deeper insight in what 1L really is. I'm allowed just a few minutes to give you a few minutes overview of what really 1L Recover is. So basically 1L is a network of it's a community of early and mid-career researchers and practitioners in the field of health policy and systems. It was actually established in 2015 to address a need that was identified after we did some situational analysis across the West African sub-region. So this network was established to support the growing numbers of individuals that were entering in the field, either as researchers or practitioners in the West African sub-region. And the support was going to be through various or panoply of activities that we are going to, implement. Particularly, we were sharing information. So any information that will enhance, so career enhancing, HPSR career enhancing information and opportunities, HPSR, publications and other resources to support the career development of the emerging actors in the field. We're also going to support, people to network, get to know more people, and then of course through that access peer support in the form of peer mentorship or coaching. And then one other thing that we did quite well was providing scholarship to enable, these emerging actors to access regional and global HPSR conferences and workshops. And then also creating the opportunity for researchers and research users to engage, to be able to ask the right questions that would lead a research that, HPSR is question driven, as opposed to being method driven. So to be able to ask the right questions, some form of engagement with, evidence users was going to, guide you aright. So this was one other area one else sought to facilitate. And our support was also through collaborative research activities. So that takes me to Recover. So in the light or in the spirit of our collaborative activities, Recover was birthed. Next slide, please. So what is what is this Recover? So basically the aim of this project is to facilitate the development of contextually relevant and evidence-informed strategies to strengthen cross-sectorial linkages to deal with collateral effects on COVID-19. So, with the outbreak of COVID, people were looking at different, things. People were addressing the outbreak itself, and little attention was paid to the collateral damages that, the pandemic was provoking or causing. So we set out to study these collateral damages. Interventions and responses that were put in place also generated some side effects which happened on our blind side. So we thought it best to give this attention to. So the specific objectives is actually structured around 4 work packages, which further is segmented into 3 phases of this work. So basically, we were carrying out a rapid assessment to see what interventions were put in place, what were the responses that were put in place to address the epidemic, and who were the stakeholders involved in these, COVID response activities. So after understanding, carrying out this situational analysis to understand what was happening in countries across the West African sub-region, we then zoomed in, or we sought to zoom into studying in greater detail. So our the phase 2 of our project sought to, develop an action plan to facilitate the implementation of deep dive cases, so specific cases to understand this effect, these collateral damages that came as a result of, responses that were put in place to address the COVID epidemic. And the third phase of our work basically is to disseminate, the findings. So that will be for later. So what have we done up until now? Next slide, please. All right. So our rapid assessment actually took off from May 2021 to March 2022 this year, and it was carried out in the 15 West African countries under 5 different country clusters. So you can see the 5 clusters of clusters that carried out these activities. But of course, we know that studying the case in greater details, we couldn't have covered the West African countries. But the issues that were cross-cutting in the countries that form the country clusters actually informed the development of the specific cases that we set out to do. So we currently are exploring 5 case studies in 5 West African countries. So in Benin, we are looking at containment or cordon sanitaire, what the difference is. So Benin, whilst other countries were doing partial lockdown, complete lockdown, and all, Benin adopted a different strategy, which was the cordon sanitaire, which we find as an interesting case to, delve deeper into see, what can be learned from this. In Ghana, we are exploring the gender transformative intervention in supporting vulnerable groups. So it came out from the Ghana cluster that most of the interventions that were put in place were more or less gender blind. And I mean, women and children happen to be among the most vulnerable people in society. So Ghana is looking at this. And then in Nigeria, basically, we are coming up with, I mean, some form of framework to address the collateral effects to support, I mean, future epidemics. In Guinea, we are looking at the rectifying the effect of COVID-19 on vulnerable women. And in Burkina Faso, of course, research that is carrying everything, the impact on health research. This is one critical issue, I mean, issue. So COVID affected so many things, but not so many attention is being given to how the research systems or health research systems were affected. So we would encourage you to keep watching this space, because we are going to be pretty soon from this time till March 2023, we are bringing out findings from these 5 case studies, and then the lessons and the issues that will be of policy interest. So keep looking, I mean, watching this space, and we'll be back with the findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Selena.
Dr. Teddy.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now coming to the main training. The initial one is to introduce us to the various activities as the groups, communities of practice and researchers that are actually leading this. So you can see that we are all doing similar things. And we realize that to engage effectively and smartly, we need to build capacities across board. So I'll hand you over to Dr. Molosiwa, who is sitting in Gaborone in Botswana, to start you with what is a policy brief. Over to you, Dinkley.
Great, thank you very much, Gina, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you that are attending with us this session. I'm very excited to be connecting with so many of you from across the continent. I've been introduced briefly, but maybe I can just add, as Gina has indicated, I'm joining you this afternoon for my time this side. From Gaborone, Botswana, where I am with the University of Botswana Faculty of Medicine and working here within the Department of Family Medicine and Public Health. So I've been given a very short amount of time to just really take you through a brief overview of how we might describe and understand a policy brief that I believe, even from the multiple work streams that many of you are probably engaged in, you can appreciate that it gives you an opportunity to be able to talk to the broader audience for some of the work that you do. Gina, if I may, my internet is a little bit unstable. Is it okay if I perhaps switch off my video? So hopefully that will keep me on until my session is done.
That's fine.
Pardon me please. For that, please. So as I indicated, my task this afternoon, or in this point of the session, is just to take you through a brief overview of what a policy brief is. And I will try to do this by way of presenting to you, first of all, what a policy brief is in terms of the purposes for which we do design a policy brief. I will speak to the different formats that we see out there or that might be available for you to follow. And then also just briefly discuss the different types of policy brief that we can develop from the work that we do. So a policy brief in a nutshell can be described as a concise summary of a particular issue or the policy option to deal with that issue that you have identified, and some recommendations on what might be the best option to address this. So in other words, we have seen many short documents that have been written to really try and inform or advise various actors. And I want to say actors, or use actors here more broadly, recognizing that there might be many of us that are attending this afternoon coming from different sectors and not just the health sector. And recognizing that these different actors that we target with our policy brief may probably be non-specialist decision makers in whatever portfolio that they work in. And so we want to be able to raise key issues to them about the changes that might be required, whether it's a policy change or the action that we are hoping that they can institutionalize in a particular given context. So as indicated, a policy brief often represents some key research findings, most especially. So you will derive this from some work that you would have done by way of research, or it could also be work that you are able to speak to in terms of your daily practice, and you have recognized certain key issues for which you can be able to gather and analyze, systematically data that you can be able to present as evidence. And therefore, it seeks to make such recommendations or call for action based on those research findings or recommendations that you could be using to target, whether it's government policymakers, decision makers, different funders for various issues that often affect society. It could be, students, it could be research advocates, and many different actors that really do matter or are responsible for certain societal action in that regard, or in particular reference to an issue that you might be able to speak to. So your policy brief might take different formats. Again, there is no one size fits for all. It often depends on the sort of information that you are able to share. It also, as we will see from the presentations that will be made by some of my colleagues in terms of why you might adopt a particular format and not the other, where issues such as your audience or the language or the issue that you want to really bring to bear, how you might best communicate that to your audience. So it would take different formats, but really what you want to be able to do with your policy brief that is most effective is to ensure that, there is often a representation of very attractive, catching design, where you, as you will again see in some of the samples that we will provided, you are able to use different diagrams in there. You are able to provide information by way of text that you might use on your policy brief. There have been multiple different lengths for which policy briefs have been designed around. Some could be, as large as 8 pages or to about 3,000 words, or they could be even shorter. So we have seen standard formats, as you will see with these different examples, ranging from 1 page to 2 pages or to 8 pages, as I've indicated. So we have a couple of samples that we're reflecting here for you. But one of the things that you can immediately recognize from across these different samples is that there's often that clear indication that what you are looking at here is a policy brief, as we know that, we don't want to get this mixed up with newsletters or things like that. What you also begin to notice is, sometimes you might find organizations or institutions that have written that particular policy brief. You will also, realize that what you see in there is some people use different formats to try and accentuate the information that they want to share with their audience. So, using, questions, for instance, to try to speak to an issue becomes a bit more interesting, and, a reader or an actor is able to see whether this matters to them. Is it a question that is of interest to them? Titles in terms of, what is it that they are communicating? To who, is this policy likely to communicate? So again, the format that you adopt would really be influenced by a number of things, but it's very important to be appreciative of the fact that whether you are going to put a lot of text, whether you are going to accentuate your policy brief or the issue within your policy brief by way of pictures, it's always very critical to be able to speak to the key findings and the key recommendations that you are proposing in terms of the issue at hand that you are either advocating for, or whether you are calling people to action, or whether it's because, you know, there is a change, a policy change that you are trying to recommend from the work that you have been doing. Next slide, please. So obviously, given the various work that we do, the various issues that we know are out there in society, there are multiple ways or different types of policy briefs that we can prepare, again, depending on what is it that we seek to achieve through the dissemination and the recommendation of the findings from our work. Two types essentially that we find out there: the advocacy brief, which often argues in favor of a particular course of action you are calling people, you know, to respond to act on a particular issue that is affecting society, or an objective brief, which really generally just gives or provides information on a particular issue that can help policymakers when they are, you know, making changes or making decisions on certain areas of work that they might be faced with. So again, you know, the fact is that all these different types of policy briefs that we each are able to design or develop really are influenced by not only just the information that we want to put across, but also in terms of the action that we are hoping our policy brief would influence. Is it a policy change? Is it really an intervention that you seek people to act upon and make changes in the way that the issue might be affecting people overall?
Recording in progress.
Next slide, Gina. Oh, okay. So this is where I will end, and I will hand over to my colleague who will take you through the relevance of a policy brief.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, Gina, should I wait for you? I can go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my name is John Boateng with the Research Department of the Parliament of Ghana. So I've been working there. I've been working in Parliament for the past 14 years, where I undertake research and analysis on economic and social data to help members of Parliament make informed decisions. So we do publish policy briefs, budget briefs, fact sheets, working paper series, among others. And in this session, I'll be presenting on the relevance and uses of policy brief to policymakers. Before I delve into that, I would like to put this in a context. As we may all be aware, there is limited use of research evidence by policymakers in making decisions. And it's basically as a result of a number of factors. One is that the research outputs are not easily understood, as it is technical in nature with all the models and jargons. Policymakers are also overwhelmed with the amount of information that they have to go through. Yet they lack the competence of undertaking a systematic review of the literature to help them make those informed decisions. There's also the issue of access to timely, quality, and relevant research evidence. And since research evidence is not the only factor they consider in making a decision, they may disregard the evidence in favor of those of the other source of information. There's also so much reliance of policymakers in their judgments, opinion, beliefs in making decisions. And this makes it difficult for them to be open to receive and consider research evidence. So if the evidence is against their expectations, they may tend to prioritize their own opinions and beliefs. And lastly, there are challenges with most of the time, there are challenges with the applicability of the research evidence in the local context and given the political and institutional context. This also accounts for the limited use of research findings or evidence in decision making. So to overcome these challenges, several strategies have emerged in the past years to promote the use of research evidence. One of these strategies is the policy brief. And I think it has been explained earlier on by the presenter. So simply, policy brief provides a concise explanation to a policy problem, gives a synthesis of the evidence available, together with options and specific recommendations for addressing that issue. The relevance of policy brief cannot be far-fetched. It serves as a vehicle for evidence-informed policy advice, which helps to reduce policymakers' bias. It also serves as a basis for policy dialogue or engagement with stakeholders or actors. This gives them a better understanding of the problem, sufficient knowledge about the implementation context, among others. It also helps policymakers to make rapid and impactful decisions. And as you may be aware, in the policy environment, we work with speed. So the policy brief provides that kind of avenue for them to have that kind of rapid information. It also provides more guidance on which actions should be taken and the steps to take, as well as the possible implementations. It also gives detailed information about the applicability of the policy in the local context, the cost, how much it will cost if they should implement that policy, and of course, the outcome measurement, which will help facilitate monitoring and evaluation. Policy briefs can also be seen as an effective tool for advocacy, when the objective is to convince other stakeholders of a position using evidence-based research. And this leads to a more confident, they become more confident on what to expect from an intervention as their decisions are guided by evidence. It is also, however, important to distinguish between the different types of uses. In other words, how do policymakers use evidence? So there are basically three uses of policy brief. We have the instrumental use, conceptual, and persuasive use. With the instrumental use, it refers to the direct use of the policy brief in the decision-making process. Conceptual use also refers to the use of policy brief to better understand a problem or a situation. And of course, the persuasive one also has to do with the use of the policy brief to confirm or justify a decision or a choice, which has already been made. But in the policy context, the conceptual and persuasive uses are commonly used. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Boateng. I think I'll take it from here by looking at the techniques for policy brief writing. And so I'll take you through things you should consider if you are writing a policy brief. We've sent you guys some 2 documents, both of them guiding you. I think we sent one on a guide to writing policy brief. In fact, this guide is very, very detailed, and it tells you the step-by-step process for which you can write a policy brief. So you can actually use it to support your write-up. But there is this brief. It's a policy brief about how to write a policy brief, the one on your far left. That looks at basically the 7 steps for which you can, write your policy brief, which has been summarized into these 5 steps here. Basically, before you start your policy brief writing, it's very, very simple actually, but at the same time, it can be difficult in that you are writing a policy brief of about 1 page or 2 pages, maximum 8 pages. The ideal number of pages that people use in writing policy brief is between 2 and 4, which is 1 sheet, but it's both front and back pages, or the folded sheet that has both front and back for all of them. So that's basically what people do. But to write it can be very daunting because of what it requires to do. And as much as it is simple, if you don't plan, then it becomes difficult. So one of the key things that we advise in writing your policy brief is to plan before you start. Like anything else, you need to really plan it. You need to plan on what goes into your policy brief, who are you targeting, basically choose your right audience, okay? And by choosing your audience, let me give you a typical example. You may be writing a policy brief that is on sexual and reproductive health services for adolescents and young people. Your policy brief might be to an advocacy brief targeting implementers of a specific government intervention or policy. So if this is the case, who will be your target audience? Your target audience are these implementers and decision makers. But if you should write the policy brief, and because it's about adolescents and young people, you write it towards the suitability of only adolescents and young people, then clearly you are going to miss out on the right target audience who will make a decision on providing these services or providing resources to support the services. So your target audience, choosing the right audience is very important. And this is important for a number of reasons, which we'll look at. Writing to the point is another thing. When you do, and those of you who have done dissertations and any academic research recently, will attest to it that once you work so hard to find all these wonderful findings, you don't want to leave anything out. And that is the problem about writing policy brief. Why? Because it makes it very difficult to say, which ones of these am I putting through and which one am I leaving out? But we don't all want to read everything that we've written. That is why this is a brief, meaning a summary, a short form of what I have to say. So you need to get to the point. You need to make it reader-friendly in terms of language, in terms of accessibility, in terms of the technicalities that you want to share, in terms of the methodology. Quite honestly, most policy briefs just give you 1 or 2 lines about the methods used. And that is even if you are targeting academic audience. But in reality, your whole point is to actually speak to the issues that you are raising, because policy brief is about discussing issues of concern or issues that you want to advocate or an information that you want to put out there. And quite honestly, the people who will be reading it do not have the time. So you need to make it very reader friendly. You must build the document with images and evidence, as my colleague have said earlier on. You need to make it attractive so people can engage with this document. We need to be able to make it to the point where if it is graph that speaks louder, use graph, but don't overburden the brief with graphs. Key ones and various ways that you can improve your policy brief. Then sometimes you may do all this work, but you'll not be able to share it with the right audience. Also, how do you target the right audience? And you can see this has been summarized into an infographic here. This is actually from the CDC, and we can share that with you after this session. So this is actually the step-by-step one on the left side from CDC. Is looking at even the formatting of your brief, considering your key audience. So you can have one thing about the policy brief, that once you do it, even though your key target audience are policymakers, implementers, or even students or whatever, you cannot control who takes it. So you can't say, hey, you are a student in secondary school, why are you reading my policy brief? You can't do that. You can't go around policing it. You need to make it accessible to everyone, because you cannot control who have access to your brief once it is published, which is why it needs to remain simple, it needs to be accessible, and it needs to be something that people can relate to by just reading. And it should be also in a language that once you take it, no matter who you are. I remember when I started doing my PhD, we have something called statistics for dummies or statistics for idiots. So, which means they have reduced it to the point that no matter how idiotic you are, excuse my language, once you take it, you can be able to relate to it. That is the rationale for writing a policy brief. It should be simple, but not simplified to the point where you lose your information. So because the policy brief is meant to do certain things. One, it is meant to communicate certain information. So you must give adequate information of the background of what the problem or the issue you are trying to communicate on. And what this means is that you are trying as much as possible to engage with certain group of people. Please, can you mute yourself for us, kindly? And then also, you are using the policy brief to convince people. You want the reader who is reading your policy brief to be convinced. And for that matter, you need to be able to address the issue in a simplified manner that will make them convinced that what you are saying is clear. But you don't just simplify it, you need to provide evidence. The evidence that you are providing should be compelling. Don't go and just do one or two interviews and come and say, oh, I'm using it to know. We want to we want you to show that you've used multiple sources to engage. You've looked at all the necessary, or should I say significant information to arrive at what you are telling people, so that it will have some form of what? Credibility when people read your work. You must also provide some form of alternative to apply systems thinking, especially when you are looking at it as something that should influence decision makers. If you are actually using this to set an agenda, to identify a problem, then clearly your role in providing alternatives should be something. You don't have to list everything in your policy brief. You can provide in your references, or sometimes in your additional information. There are sections for it where you say, if you need additional information, go to the site. So yet again, you can do posting of information where people can get information. The essence also is to stimulate the reader to make a decision over an issue. So this is very, very important. The one making the decision needs to be stimulated. Not that you've written a policy that you think it is good enough, so they should make a decision based on it. No, you must be able to stimulate them to understand where you are coming from and the point you are trying to make. So that is the whole essence of it. So there are key things you need to also, techniques you need to engage in. And this technique is, can you kindly mute yourself? Can any of the co-hosts kindly mute this person? So one of the key things is to be short and to the point. Remember, if you have done a project for 5 years, 3 years, even 1 year, let's just assume you've done your project, which is mostly your dissertation, and you've done this only for even 3 months or 6 months, and you have to look at it, then clearly what this means is that you may have to consider that with regards to, you may have to consider this with regards to how do I share this information in 1 page or 2 pages? How do I even summarize everything into, what do you call it? Into getting this 1 page, 500 words, 700 words, or 900 words, or even if it's 3,000 words. You've written a dissertation, which is what, 40 pages, 20 pages, or even if it's a PhD, you've done what, 80 pages worth of PhD, and you have to reduce it to a 1-pager, and this is not even an abstract. How do I do that? It's not an easy thing to do, which is why you may need to be able to engage with it. You need to be able to keep it to the point. You need to be able to provide enough information so that people know this is the issue and it has been clearly shown. It should be based on firm evidence, and this firm evidence are the sources of your data. That's why if you have any other evidence, you must provide it. You must focus on the meaning and not the methods, which means that we are not, because people who are reading this, as was pointed out, may not be necessarily people within your area. You really need to think about the method, the meaning that you want the reader to take away, how you actually convey their interest, and also how you would actually reach out to persuade them. So it's not so much about the method, the details of the, oh, we did this econometric, wonderful graphs and what have you. It's not so much about that. It's about what did we find? What are the issues of concern and how do we address it? You must relate to the bigger picture. And relating to the bigger picture means that you are relating to the issues on the context within which you are actually raising it. So don't go and just do one thing and then say that, you know, we are looking at it from this sector. You must relate to the bigger picture with regards to how you reach out, how people can draw conclusion reading your work, how they can relate to it, even though you are not even referring to the immediate context, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm moving on to the tips. Like I said earlier on, the people who will read your work are people who do not have time. They simply do not have the time. They are very busy people, most of them parliamentarians. They work as technocrats at the ministries or the agencies or the departments. They are people who are in the front line implementing the policies that we have given to them. So if whoever your target is, because you are targeting people who do not have time to read the whole document, you want to make this as relevant to them as possible. And something that when they take, they'll be compelled to want another one. So it should look attractive. It must appear interesting. It should be short and easy to read. If by the time I finish even reading your summary, I don't understand what you are saying. In fact, if you don't take it, I'll throw it where I'll never say it again. So yet again, be wary of some of the requirements that make your work easy. So we know that, as Nicola was showing the samples of policy brief, one of the key things we realize that most policy briefs are in series. Some of you may come onto this training program because you want to start doing it for your facilities or your institution or for something. You should know, you should be clear what you want to use it for. Is this an annual policy brief? So every year you produce one. Is this a quarterly, which means you produce 3 times a year? Biannually, every other month? Monthly? Some of them, they don't have any specific, but it is a number numerically. Usually you see issue 1, series 1, and so on. This is telling you the numbers that people have allocated to tell you how the series or the levels that they are in. It could be seasonal. You see some of them will say autumn issue or winter issue or summer issue. Basically, the seasonal ones are the ones that are done in quarterly. It's just a different way of naming it. And you can have a one-off brief. You may not have something ongoing that allow you to have a regular production of policy brief, but you can have a one-off one, which you think, what I found here is so important, I want to put it out there. And then also another requirement that we need to bear in mind is the total number that you need. If the number of words will determine how many pages. If you want 1-page policy brief and you are bringing 1,500 words, clearly it is not possible. Because it's not only the words, but you also have to have pictures and something to support to show that, you know, I did this work genuinely. So yet again, you need to look at it. The total number of pages, we said the minimum page is 1, maximum page 8. Do not go beyond 8. If you go beyond 8, a lot of people will not read your policy brief. So please bear that in mind. Ideal pages 2 or 4. Ideal pages. And it all depends on whether it is going to be even print or soft copies, which is PDFs. So you need to think about the structure, like we said, the text, the colors that you are going to use, the graphics, the photographs, sometimes you have boxes, the language. It's all part of the manuscript requirement. As you can see here, there is example 1 here. You can see this is on COVID-1 issue series 1. So it may be just one series, or maybe once the person says series 1, it means that there should be more series you'll be expecting. Then you can see the picture here, giving you some idea about what the policy brief is. Some of them even have the information of the author, besides the information of the institution that is leading it. But if you want to look at it, if you are writing it, please don't start by looking at the picture and how beautiful it is. Write it simply in Word. Open your Word document, write your policy brief. When you finish, go and look for the pictures that will work for you and add them to it. Where you have some things that you want to highlight, put them in boxes somewhere else in your, in your Word document. Just don't complicate your life. Write it first before you now put it in the mode that we see as fancy policy brief. And what you need to pay attention to is the title of the work, the policy brief, the summary or abstract, the key message. The key message usually is 1 message or 3 messages or 2, not more, not less, and not long sentences. Key, simple, short message. That when I take your policy brief, I read it and it stick with me. Then the introduction, then the main body text. In fact, the one thing that you need to bear in mind when you are doing this is how to break your thing up into tab layers. So you have the main heading, the subheading, subheading, so you don't give them 1.1 like the way you write dissertation. No, it based on the font you are using and the size of the font, and whether you are going to highlight them into bold or not. So this one tells you the various levels of what do you call it that you have. Then also your body, like I said, should be done well. One thing that is very important when you are doing a policy brief, especially an advocacy brief, is the policy implication. You are actually doing a policy brief with the intent to advocate for something. So once you are advocating for something, we must know the implication of this to policy. So yet again, your policy implication must be well stated and done. And then the recommendations, the policy implication basically looks at the implication for policy, but you can also look at it as recommendation. That will include policy implication. You don't have to separate them. Recommendation may not necessarily have implications for policy. So whichever one works for you, you must consider that. Then you must conclude. Your conclusion should not be a long one. It could be something that you want to highlight as a follow-up, or something that you want people to take away at the end, that this is, for all that we've done, this is how we concluded it. So these are all examples. As you can see, the recommendation here has been termed proposal. You can see that the approach adopted is the summary here. And then you see already how they have put, even numbered the key points that they want people to work with. The summary is very, very important, and sometimes using boxes. You can use boxes, as you can see in some of the documents later on. You can use boxes or sidebars. Sidebars allow you to highlight things that you want them to take away. You can use cases, you can use tables, graphics, and the photograph we keep emphasizing because it makes it attractive. Then you must have your masthead. Your masthead is telling you this is a policy brief, this is the series, or just, if you don't put series, we know it's a one-off thing. And then also the institution that is leading this policy brief. The author's acknowledgement, publication, and references is usually at the last page, whether it is 4 pages, whether it is 2 pages, is usually at the last page. If you have too much to say, it becomes difficult. So you need to look at it. And as you can see here, this policy brief have key messages, 3 key messages. It has the heading, it has the subheading, and then it has the, what do you call it, the masthead, which is looking at the organization, FAO, which is the UN institution. You can see the pictures, and they have the sidebar telling you this is policy brief number 3. Okay, and this is FAO, Agricultural Development Economics. So it tells you all these things, and you see 2017 October what have you. So all this gives you some form of information, and it all depends on how you look at it. This one doesn't have any kind of pictures per se, but you can see in the masthead, they have embedded some form of picture to attract people. And here they have the box here, which is containing the key messages, just as the other one. And you can see at the bottom information around who they are and what they are doing. So all of these tells you what a policy brief should look like, and you need to be aware. But you can provide them in simple Word documents. Then you now use the tools that you can. There are so many apps out there. Some of them are free, and others you need to pay for them. You can have something. The basic one that I have used in the past is the Publisher, Microsoft Publisher. Publisher actually helps you to do this, and then you can change colors, put them in boxes. It gives you some form of template within which you can work. Sometimes it can be difficult to manipulate, but you need to choose the font that is helpful, the size that is helpful, and all these things helps you to put something together. And it's something that you can do very easily, but you need to have somebody who will edit it for you, because once you put it out there, it's difficult to retrieve everything back. I'm going to pause here and ask for questions. Dintley, can you kindly see if there are some questions in the, what do you call it, in the chat box for us to address? Otherwise, if you have any question, you can raise your hand virtually, and then we would call you.
Great, thank you, Gina. I don't notice any questions on the chat, so maybe we can just allow people from across the floor if they have any questions or comments.
Okay. Does anyone have any question? Let me check from the... Okay, so, okay, we have one person. Okay, so we have Dr. Evans Danso. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you very much for the good presentation and for the education this morning. So I think we have run down on the development, the style, the structure, and all that. I mean, the circulation of the policy brief, I don't know if we can throw more light on that. Once you have finished the means for which you would want to send it to the target audience, if there is a certain kind of, good practices that probably can be shared.
Okay, so thanks for that, Dr. Danso. So this will be discussed after our group session. So that will be the dissemination aspect of how to disseminate your policy briefs. So my colleague would discuss that later on. And yeah, so hold your horses and keep that question burning.
But I think Selena would help us with this one. I don't know whether
Juliana,
it's a question or a comment, and then there is also a similar question, I think, to what Evans asked earlier from Dr. Taylor in the chat, but it's also around how do you disseminate a policy brief, so for later.
Okay.
So Dr. Ramatulai, she's actually re-emphasizing the fact that the policy brief needs to be evidence-based. The fact that is, like Dr. Teddy was saying, that it should be a concise document doesn't mean you are just putting anything out there. It should be supported by evidence. That's what she said.
Right.
So I think it's more of re-echoing what Dr. had already said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Juliana, please go ahead. Juliana.
Yes, Juliana, on t'entend. Je t'entends.
Moi, je l'entends pas.
So Juliana is interpreting, and she's the designated interpreter. So I don't know if she's, we can't hear her because she's doing the French version. I'm not sure how Zoom does this. Juliana? Okay, so if anybody else have any question, I assume we can do that in...
There is another question.
Okay.
So please, does Systac help with publishing policy briefs? Because the publisher has a lot of influence on how far one's policy brief goes. That is to you, Dr. Teddy.
So yes, that's true. I used to do this when I have a lot of time on my hands. I used to publish when I do the MPH. One of the things that I let them do is to write a policy brief and then edit it, and it's a lot of work. But then with this after this particular session, we are going to put out a call for only students or those who have just recently completed, who have done their dissertation and are looking for a place to publish their findings, to do a policy brief, for us to choose the best ones to publish on our website for them. So they will still be authors of they will be the main authors of their own work, but it will be something that will be available for them. But the editor's work is very, very important. Like I'm saying, it's simply trying to say, okay, this is what you have to plan a lot about what evidence do I have and how do I want to work with the evidence to be able to engage with it. So these are all very, very important.
So Gina, you are speaking, but you are muted. Everyone seems to be muted. We can just see the caption. Oh boy. All right. Does that help?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes.
So I
yes,
said everything for nothing. Anyways, let me try and answer it again. What I was saying is that yes, the role of the editor is very important. That when I used to have a lot of time on my hands, I used to encourage my PhD students to write a policy brief. Not everybody got selected, but to select the best one and publish them, as well as blogs. Either you choose a policy brief or you choose a blog, and then we would now share it on the webpage for CHESPO, which is the Center for Systems and Policy Research. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of work. So usually we do select the best one, like any publication. We do select the best well-written policy briefs. And after this session, there'll be an opportunity for graduate students who have done their dissertation, recently finished, or is yet to submit their work, but have a lot of evidence to write up their work into a policy brief. There will be a selection process, which means we look at your abstract first. And if it's worthwhile and your work is, we would be able to publish up to 10 policy brief from some of the students who will be interested in doing this exercise. And it's all because if you learn something and you don't put it into practice, then it becomes difficult for you to remember. It's a skill that you must always, put into practice. So you need to actually do this. You need to, because you need to have a proper software that supports you to put it into proper frame. And then also you must also represent a particular institution. So it's always better if you're doing it for an institution or for a particular purpose. So the one that I did with my student, it was called the student series. But before then we had researcher series in the past. And then, of course, because I got so busy, we could not continue with the student series after that session. So yet again, there is a possibility for us to encourage students on this particular platform who are learning this method of disseminating information, evidence-based information for that matter, to put their work out there by summarizing it in a way of writing policy briefs. In next year sometime, we'll look at how to write a blog. That one is less academic. So, but it is also something that you cannot just write because for the sake, it's an academic blog. So you still need some skill to be able to do that. So yet again, just to answer the question that was asked. Is there any more questions?
Yes, please. There is another question. Please give Juliana the chance to come with it. Dr. Juliana.
Juliana, if you can hear us, kindly type your question in the chat box. You seem to be not able to get out of the interpreter's mode.
But Selena, you are able to see the other one.
Let me just do it quickly. So Dr. Fatou from Senegal is asking, I mean, are there criteria to help shape the policy brief? She's saying that if you are working on a big project and you have so much to say, is there a way that we can prioritize? And is there, a particular strategy that one needs to use, if you can help us with that?
Okay, so that is actually eating into the next activity that we are going to do, which is the group work. Like she said, which is a good question, which is where you have a big project, you have so much information, all of this information are amazing and wonderful. And I'll give you a typical example. When you're writing your dissertation as a student, you've gone to the field, you've seen all this wonderful information, you want to write them, your supervisor just put red line in all of them. All this one is unnecessary. You know how you feel? That is exactly what policy brief is. Except you won't see the red line when people toss your work away. So you need to break it down. It starts with breaking it down. You can break them down into bite sizes. That is why we have series. You don't have to give them all the information at the same time. So you break them down into, okay, this one, we want to look at this side. Who are the target audience, which you people would now be discussing? Who are the target audience? And then we would now go back to what information do I want to give to whom? And so you write your policy brief and you target the people as to how you can disseminate to reach your target audience, to make it accessible to them. So I think we are running into the next one, but prioritizing, you've just answered it, prioritize and break it down into various elements. We've done this for now. How do we share this information? Who would this information go to? Okay, we have these 6 ideas. We want it all out there because we think it's very important. But this one is not such, something that policymakers, well, it doesn't add so much to knowledge, but it highlights something. Who should we give this to? How do we, so sometimes you don't always have to use policy brief. You can use other modes as well. You can use the blog we were talking about. You can use infographics, which is summarizing it into key things, pictures, You can use so many, what we call the vlog, video blog, short 3 minutes. Now there are so many of them on YouTube. You see, so you can have all these ways of discussing and engaging with your work. So there are various methods of doing this. I hope I answered your question. Okay, is there any more questions? Okay, so please stay with us. We are going to go into the group now to engage with the facilitators. There'll be 4 groups. I'm still trying to assign, but I'll leave the rest to assign themselves. So we'll get into the breakout groups. The French group have been assigned. The rest of you can assign to any of the groups that makes sense to you. Okay, so create. Oh, no. Oh, it's gone back. So we are going to have this. No, going back. Sorry, guys. And then you work with us with the questions that you'll be asked. with this discussion, it will help you to now reflect. In my own context, I have all this information. How do I work with how do I draft the policy brief? Maybe I'm sitting in a place where data is readily available. I really want to put this information out there, or I have so many information I want to share. How do I go about it? So what should you consider and what we are going to do in the breakout rooms? So we'll have, I don't know if you can see the breakout rooms yet. So our time will be 15 minutes to work within the breakout rooms. I'll do it assigned automatically, and then you can get yourself out of these breakout rooms. So room 1, I'm going to rename you as the French room. French group. Group 2. So if you don't speak French, you can move yourself out. Group 2, I'll rename you as advocacy. Then group 3, you'll be renamed as students group. And then group 4 will be the implementers group. Implementers. Okay. Oh, am I missing something? So I'm going to open the groups now. Kindly put yourself, find where you are. If you're happy with it, stay there. If you are not, move out and I'll reallocate you. I'll move you to somewhere else.
Hello.
So we finished but I think we cannot, on ne peut pas, on n'entend pas. Je vois qu'elle parle.
Sorry, Kadi, we are done. You are on for the dissemination of policy briefs.
Yes, Juliana, tu vas, English speaker can use translation.
Yes.
Okay.
So now we are going to discuss how to disseminate a policy brief.
Ok, maintenant, je vais aller rapidement. Déjà, dans les
I will
différents
go quite
groupes,
quickly.
on a
In each
discuté
group,
de ça.
we talked about that.
Voilà. Et ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est qu'il faut que la stratégie de
To keep
dissémination
in mind that the strategy for
soit
dissemination
adaptée au public cible.
should be adapted to your audience.
Ça, c'est vraiment la chose la plus...
This is the most important thing.
La chose la plus importante.
Your strategy adapted to your audience.
Gina, slide.
Next slide, please.
No, the first, yes.
The first slide, okay.
Donc, selon notre public cible, là où le public cible
depending
va
on your
d'habitude chercher
audience,
l'information,
you need to look for the place where they use to go when they are looking for information.
Pour pouvoir partager
And
notre
we
information.
adapt our format to that platform or that place.
Donc, si le public cible a l'habitude
So
d'aller sur les websites, on va partager cela en ligne. Et s'ils ont un site web, on pourra le partager là-bas.
The website
Ou alors,
share
on
the
peut
information. I mean, the policy brief.
Et puis distribuer
also
main à main.
Hard copies and distribute it
Alors, on peut passer
to people physically. You can use the emails
et puis
and all the
aussi les
newsletters
newsletters, c'est-à-dire les journaux des institutions pour pouvoir partager ça.
Newsletters of
On
institutions.
peut aussi utiliser les réseaux sociaux. Par exemple, Twitter, si on utilise beaucoup Twitter pour partager. Et LinkedIn, Facebook,
for researchers,
voilà.
but you can
Tout
also
ça,
use
c'est des
LinkedIn
plateformes. Même
Facebook
actuellement, il y a des groupes de travail WhatsApp. On peut
There are also WhatsApp groups,
voilà,
professional groups where you can share your
policy
policy brief.
Aussi, la note de politique est un outil de discussion.
And the policy brief is a tool that we use for discussion. On peut,
par exemple, organiser une réunion spécifique
as such, we can
au
use
cours de laquelle on va partager le policy brief et puis discuter vraiment du contenu afin de pouvoir adapter les recommandations au contexte dans lequel on est censé mettre en œuvre les informations. Voilà. En langage de transfert de connaissances, on appelle ça atelier de délibération. Donc, on peut organiser un atelier de délibération en s'appuyant sur la note de politique. Et on peut aussi partager la note de politique lors des conférences. Voilà, on a ça et puis on partage. Mais le plus important, j'insiste vraiment, c'est que la stratégie de dissémination est toujours ciblée sur les comportements de recherche d'information de notre public.
Again, it is important to adapt, calibrate your strategy to the way our audience is used to look for information. This is very important.
Voilà. Sinon, notre note de politique ne va vraiment pas atteindre son objectif et il ne sera pas lu par notre public cible.
Otherwise, the policy brief will not be read and it won't reach our target audience.
Et donc, notre objectif de pouvoir changer les pratiques, on ne pourra pas l'atteindre.
So we won't be able to change practices if they don't read the policy brief.
Donc, je pense que rapidement, j'ai fini avec ce que je devais partager avec vous.
I am done
Merci
with
à tout le
my...
monde.
Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you both. I think we are done now. So the dissemination, I think, is the key things for those who are already doing the policy brief. But like we said, all of us touch on it in our groups. Look at the best ways to disseminate according to what you are doing, the purpose for which you are doing it, your audience, and then the routine ways of doing it. But now, thank God we have technology. Most of them are free. Use technology to reach out as much as you want. And just like we are doing this online, which wouldn't have been possible, getting people from all over, it is possible with technology nowadays. So, and with that said, do not undermine the use of the hard copies. You are going for meetings, you are going for conferences, or you are having a dissemination workshops, use that to disseminate your information and give people hard copies to refer to. Then people will engage with it, or even posting it. Now there's nobody posting anything anymore, but you can email it. The problem with email, you can't guarantee they read it, but you can do activities around some of these things so that you get people to ensure that they have engaged with your work. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Kadi. So just to let you know our next steps, and then also thank you for Dr. Juliana for the interpretation. So we would be calling, like I said, we'll be calling students to submit. It could be past students or present ones to submit their dissertation, do a policy brief on their dissertations. We are going to select maximum of 10 best ones and we'll publish them in 2 series. So look out for that space. I think you can, since you know, if you really want to do this, please start drafting it already. Just don't make it complicated. Put it in simple, plain Word document. We will convert it when we get the information. All we want to know is that you have good information. And then your abstract, your message, when we make the call, we would make sure that we put together the list of things that we require you to present for us. Then also the certificate, we will be sending all those who participated. We'll be having a picture session, which is very, very rare. So we'll all put on our cameras so that we can take a picture of the screen. We'll have a picture section, and we are hoping to send only the participants, those who actually participated, not those who registered, certificate of participation. So this will be a PDF certificate. You'll be getting it, not today, but you'll be getting, we need to be able to look at the numbers who came on. And then for most of the practitioners as well as our students and researchers. We want to have champions in their various institutions. People will be promoting various ways of systems thinking as a way of doing things. So please look out for your engagement with us moving forward. These things are free. People pay to go and, you know, do some of these trainings. So kindly join when you have the opportunity. Also advocate for others to use these tools. And then also join, if you're interested in Systac Global, join the Systac Hive. I'll show you the link very soon for you to think about, or you can just Google Systac Hive and you find them. And then we want to also support practitioners and decision makers. So if you're a practitioner and you think that your team requires certain skills, feel free to approach us. Let us know. If it is relevant for us, we'll do it. If it is not, then of course, if we have any person within our group or network that have the skill to support, we'll see how best we can do that. So yet again, we are available for all these activities. So this is you can reach out to me, or you can go ahead straight away to join the Systac group. There are so many people all over from the world. And we'll be having a Systac conference in future, but not yet. We can have our own mini conference in the African region. So the whole idea is to promote systems thinking approaches to way of so that is systematized, and then you can have the benefit for long terms. Okay, so on that said, I'm going to stop sharing. Please let's all put our cameras on so that we can take a picture, and then we'll use that to send you a certificate or something like that. Where is, I'm going to look at, how do we do this now? Okay, so here we go. So now I'll remove the pins. So anybody who have been pinned, please remove yourself from the pin. How do, stop sharing. Okay, all right, so let's remove ourselves from being pinned so that we can all take a picture. Kadi, you are still pinned.
I don't know how I can do to.
You want to stay in the interpretation room, I can see that.
No.
You'll be removed from the pin, so.
What I can do to remove is.
View, okay. Oh,
okay.
that's it, excellent. Hey, how do we
Okay,
take this picture?
it's okay on my side.
Do anybody have an idea how we can take a picture? Smiles, guys.
No.
I can just do, I have only done screen print. I don't know how else to do it.
Okay, that's fine. Abigail, we can see you. Okay, we can see you now. Sibele, Dara, we can see you. Go ahead. I'll take you with my phone, I think. Okay, so we'll be sending you certificate of attendance, please. So look out for that space latest before we go for Christmas. Yeah, today is 14th, so we have 10 days to send it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. For the students, look out for the space where you can write about your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So very important for them to join the Hive because that's like to work on it.
Okay. Tomorrow there is another one for practitioners. If you are a manager of some sort, please join. That one you have to bring your computer because there will be real work on how to process map to improve your performance. So yet again, if you are interested tomorrow, kindly join. It's a different time. So if you have the notification, look at the information and join from there. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice day.
A lovely one to you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice day too.
Thank you.
Nobody told me I didn't put
Thank
my picture on. Oh no.
Oh my.
Very nice to meet you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take care. Bye.
To meet you too.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Bye. Lovely to meet you people. Nice,
You too.
nice.
Bye.
Nice.